All right, let's dive right into this. We're going to unpack a 3,000-year-old text, the very first chapter of the book of Joshua. And our goal here is to see what timeless lessons it might hold about leadership and, what real success looks like, especially when the odds are just completely stacked against you. So, just for a second, I want you to imagine something. Picture yourself stepping into a massive new role, a huge promotion. But here's the catch. From any logical, purely human perspective, failure doesn't just seem possible, it seems practically guaranteed. Well, that whole scenario, that was the exact reality for a man named Joshua. You see, after spending decades as basically an assistant, he was suddenly thrown into the deep end, tasked with one of the most intimidating leadership transitions in all of history. I mean, think about who he had to follow. Moses, a leader of legendary, almost mythical stature. This is the guy who spoke with God face to face, who led an entire nation for 40 years. And Joshua, he was his assistant. The sources call this a tall order, and honestly, that feels like the understatement of this century. We're talking about impossibly big shoes to fill. And the challenge wasn't just about replacing a legend, it was about the mission itself. His job was to lead a group of nomadic people, former slaves with zero military training, to go and conquer a land that the world's mightiest army, Egypt, couldn't even manage to hold. His enemies were fierce, trained warriors, holed up in these fortified cities. Seriously, on paper, this looks like a complete suicide mission. So, faced with this totally impossible task, you'd think he was on his own, right? But the text doesn't just leave Joshua hanging. Instead, it lays out a divine strategy, a clear and surprisingly simple playbook for how to succeed when absolutely everything says you should fail. And this playbook, it really boils down to three core ingredients. First, a foundational promise to build everything on. Second, a command that gets repeated over and over. And third, a guiding principle to keep the whole mission on track. Okay, first up is the promise. And this is so crucial. Before Joshua is asked to do a single thing, before he even takes one step, he's given a guarantee. This is the absolute bedrock of the entire plan. And what's the promise? It's all about presence. The same divine power that was with the legend, Moses, would now be with him. He's told right from the get-go, you will not be leading alone. Notice, this has nothing to do with Joshua's personal capability. It's all about who is with him. All right, let's move on to the second ingredient. This one is a direct command, and it's repeated with such incredible emphasis. It's almost as if God knows it's the one thing Joshua will be tempted to forget every single day. Now, what's really fascinating here is the sheer repetition. 3 times in just a handful of verses, Joshua's told, be strong and courageous. Why? The text just hammers this point home because the mission was practically designed to stir up fear, to create opposition, and to sow overwhelming doubt. But let's be really clear what courage means here. It is not about the absence of fear. Of course he was afraid. The situation was absolutely terrifying. Instead, courage is defined as the choice to act despite that fear, based entirely on that foundational promise he was just given. It's about moving forward because of the promise, not because of a lack of fear. And that brings us to the final ingredient. This provides a constant source of direction, a map for the mission ahead. It's the tool that's going to make sure his actions stay aligned with the whole plan. This book of the law, which was basically the foundational scriptures of his people, it wasn't meant to be some dusty rulebook you consult every now and then. No, by meditating on it day and night, it was supposed to become a living, breathing, guiding philosophy, making sure that success wasn't just achieved, but that it was pursued in the right way. So, you put these 3 ingredients together, a promise of presence, a command to be courageous, and a guidebook for direction. What does success and prosperity actually mean in this ancient playbook? It might not be what you think. Yeah, the sources are super clear to distinguish this from some kind of modern prosperity gospel. Success here has nothing to do with material wealth or power or status. Instead, it's defined by faithfulness and obedience to the guidebook. The focus isn't on the outcome, it's on the process of following the principles, day in and day out. So what this all boils down to is that true prosperity, according to this recipe, was a spiritual state. It was a state of alignment, of trust, of being in harmony with divine principles, no matter what the external circumstances looked like. The real goal wasn't just to win the battles, but to do it faithfully. And this ancient recipe really, it just challenges our modern definitions of success, doesn't it? It pushes us to ask whether the greatest success we can find is not in the final destination, but in the faithful journey we take to get there. It makes you wonder, is it really about what we achieve? Or is it about who or what we choose to follow along the way?